Hey there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. This is another Escaping Atheism podcast with Max Kolbe and other members of the Escaping Atheism team. Joining me today are both Andrew Stratelites and John Baptiste, who've been with us since the beginning. Remember our other volunteers and say hi to them when you see them. Please give us a like, please give us a subscribe. We'd like to continue expanding our operations, get better equipment, and reach more people. Please do give us your financial as well as your spiritual support. See our website for our funding vehicles. Now, before we begin, again, they are both on the Escaping Atheism team, have been from the beginning. Just say hello to everybody, Andrew.
Hey everyone, it's Andrew.
How's your night going tonight?
Not too bad. I always hate time changes, so that's been fun with the jet lag. But besides that, I have been having some fun in Linux land. So I'm trying to ignore the news, but that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So
yeah, and hey everybody, John Baptiste, one of our other founding volunteers. How you doing tonight, John?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right, rocking the MLG tag as usual, Gamergate, yo. Anyway, okay, so in the news, we of course have the latest killing by an atheist. And I'm going to put it that way because it is time we change the culture, as far as I'm concerned. The mass media wants to mention someone's religion every time they go off and do something half-cocked, but they never want to talk about when an atheist does anything. Which is a way for atheists, and I would have said this when I was an atheist. I did, in fact, say it was when I was an atheist, which pissed some political people off. I said, listen, if you're gonna make everything about their religion, then atheism has to be a factor too. The press doesn't track it, but it looks like they're starting to. And I truly believe that's because we started a trend a year or two ago when we started this project, because I do get followed by a lot of people in the press. The Max Kolbe account does. Even before it was the Max Kolbe account, it was mine. I know a lot of people in the press. And they watch things like Twitter and other social media for trends. And anti-atheist sentiment is in fact growing in social media, and I think much of the culture, including in places like Europe and Canada, by the way. In any case, what we seem to know about this shooting is, well, of course, like most of these things, it was complicated. Apparently, he was mad at his grandmother-in-law, or what was he mad about originally? I think John Baptiste, you knew.
He was having a fight with his mother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Just not long before he carried out the mass shooting, according to CNN, and he killed her mother, but I mean the grandmother-in-law, but he did not kill the mother-in-law.
Well, I mean, with all these things, usually, I mean, there have been planned terrorist activities by atheists and atheist groups in history, don't get me wrong. I don't know where you would put some of the Antifa activity on that, but it is worth noting that Antifa is an explicitly atheist organization, and they are not nice to you if you won't be atheist in Antifa. But, I mean, if you look at it, what people have been saying for thousands of years, and by the way, not just Christians, but people of multiple religions and points of view, have always said, and for thousands of years, no idea of God, and what you get is radical subjectivity in all things, and you become the arbiter of right and wrong. And actually, I can say, having been an atheist, that's even a very confusing position to be in. A few months ago, of course, everybody in the online atheist community was furious with us and deflating atheism, because we noted the case of what used to be called the skeptic feminists, which was this weird trio of atheist, self-declared skeptic rationalists, and one of them wound up going off and killing another. They had been making the YouTube rounds, talking about feminism, talking about atheism, talking about men's issues. People were trying to be nice to them, polite to them. They thought they were a little crazy. But again, people got angry. But I said, listen, the atheism obviously had something to do with this. They would scream and say, well, this guy is obviously he's a war veteran, PTSD, not very bright. And they didn't want to note that, yeah, and then if you preach a radical message of there is no God, religion is stupid, religious people are stupid, they're only the atheist like me is smart, and you teach that to a dumb, slightly mentally impaired or whatever person, and they're going to conclude whatever they want as far as right and wrong goes. They will decide they are the arbiters of truth. It reminds me very much of Jim Jones, who was a preacher who, and I'm showing an image of it now, a Christian preacher who turned atheist, ran down to Guyana and wound up killing hundreds, quite a few of, I can't remember how many people died there at Jonestown, but they were forced to drink the cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, which is where Kool-Aid drinking comes from. You know, they say, oh, you've drunk the Kool-Aid. Yeah, well, they're referring to that. And he was actually an atheist. He publicly declared it very loud. He deconverted and went back to his natural, rational state and became a killer. Sorry, when I say that, it's just that people in the atheist cult these days like to say that when they became atheists, they deconverted, by which they mean they suddenly became rational for the first time in their lives. That's kind of the cult mentality they have. And so, again, I just merely note that when Jim Jones deconverted, he killed hundreds of people. There's another person, and there's countless examples of this throughout history. But here's Jeffrey Dahmer, a cannibal killer, and he killed and ate a bunch of people. Here he is saying, if a person doesn't think there is a God to be accountable, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it in within acceptable ranges? And some of the stuff he did was sick. He even, he would go out to a gay bar. I think most of his victims were gay men, actually. I can't remember for sure, but I think most of them were. And, you know, slip them, get them drunk, slip them Mickeys, and then would do things like inject formaldehyde into their brain, like through the bottom of the eye, like where they, basically he would give them lobotomies with chemicals, like, and then, you know, eat them sometimes over a period of days. It just, I know the average atheist is sitting there going, wow, I can't believe you're bringing any of this up. But I got to tell you, it's rational that for someone to conclude that if there is no ultimate right and wrong, then he gets to decide ultimately for everybody what is right is wrong. That's not an uncommon thing. Atheists have a reputation for being narcissists and control freaks, and, well, I'm sorry, when you declare there's no ultimate right and wrong, this is what you get. Do I think the godlessness was the only thing that caused this church shooter? No. But give me a break. To say he's out there obviously preaching propaganda that he probably got from places like Atheist Republic and Rational Wiki and Iron Chariots and all those other vile atheist sites, which, by the way, while they call themselves atheists, are mostly anti-Christian hate sites, filled frequently with easily debunked misinformation that gullible fools will believe. So, with that off my chest, what else? You guys got any observations?
Well,
go ahead, Jean-Baptiste. You go first.
The Jim Jones thing. He was an atheist, and his congregation were atheists, according to the FBI documents that they released on the subject to somebody that runs a blog. He got a Freedom of Information Act as soon as they went declassified and put him on the blog. You can Google it. I don't remember the blog name, or I can Google it if you want. But in those documents, there's transcripts of him talking to somebody. I forget who, but they were talking to somebody, and he actually said, "Yes, I am an atheist, and so is my congregation. I don't think anybody that listens to me believes in God." And it's just interesting to note that.
Here's the thing, and this has been going on for years. I'm flashing this on the screen. This is Jim Jones, the mass murdering psychotic who deconverted out of Christianity and then killed a bunch of people. Here's a good quote. It's a direct quote. "Now, if Father was a sky god, he would eliminate all poverty. I'm amazed that I have as much power as people I do with people not paying attention to me." That's not the best quote. There's several. "I am a savior because I save everybody that comes to me." He's declaring himself God. Okay, and you're correct. Yeah, this is one video I'm showing. Oh, here's a good quote. Right, I've seen this. I became an atheist. I'm an atheist. These are things that he was saying. These are in FBI tapes. The interesting thing is that there have been efforts for more than 10 years to expunge information like this from places like YouTube. There has been. Talk to Brett Keane sometime. Talk to some of the others. Christians who point out anti-atheist information, not just Christians, anybody pointing out anti-atheist information, has been subject to harassment, abuse, deplatforming, demonetization, and having their stuff simply deleted. That's been going on for years. And nobody in the online atheist community now whinging about their free speech rights had anything to say when that was going on. If you doubt it, listen to my interviews with Brett Keane, or just go ask him, or talk to many of the others I've talked to who went through that. Atheists have been running something called a skeptic mafia, and they actually do make it hard to find information like this. They don't want you talking about how atheism may make you a little nutty. Sorry, I went off on a rant there. Who else has something to observe?
Well, just sort of riffing off what you've said historically, the very first documented atheist named Darigaras of Milos, who was a poet in ancient Greece, was basically so much of a dick and basically did only what he wanted, that they literally chased him out of the Greek cities, and he was exiled. This type of uncontrolledness with atheism has been around for at least 2,500 years. And the other interesting thing is, at least in America, it always seems to be associated with very anti-Christian sentiment. I'm sure that part of the reason why that church was targeted was because it was in fact a church, and that he despised religious people and religion, and I don't know if he had that innately, or if it was sort of brainwashed into him. But there's definitely a nasty side to othering religious people, or claiming that they're dumber than you, or what have you. It helps legitimize these grievances and resentment that these folks have. The other thing that's really sort of shocked and horrified me is the way that a lot of people in the mass media are responding to people just saying, my prayers and thoughts are with you, and my condolences on this tragedy. They're literally freaking out because people are praying for the victims.
I'll tell you, I had no idea when the new atheist fad explosion happened. I never thought it would ever take on like it has. But of course, we know now, if you look into it, you'll find that the new atheist movement with, the Four Horsemen, Hitchens, Dawkins, all that, a little more 10 years ago, they were a funded propaganda campaign by the people who run the media. Smart theists for more than 10 years have been complaining that they can't get through, and that people who are in the new atheist thought won't listen to them. And that's because it's always been a low-level propaganda campaign to get everyday people to hate religion. I've seen young people who think reading a Bible may make you a drug addict, that it may make you violent, that it may make you crazy. That is in the culture now. And I've spoken to many people who've been involved in the cause of criticizing atheism, and they've talked about having their lives ruined in many ways, like people who criticize feminism over the last 20 or 30 years reported having their lives ruined, until it eventually became acceptable to begin criticizing feminism again. I'm going to show a couple of sources here that matter. I happen to know the authors of this Conservapedia article. I'm going to link it in the low bar when we're done. I know people scoff at Conservapedia, but you know what? It's as good as Wikipedia or frickin' Rational Wiki. And there may be stuff on there you don't like or agree with, but the pages on atheism are done primarily by two men I know very well. One Christian, one an evangelical Christian, one a Catholic. And there's others in the mix. The evangelical especially has nearly had his life ruined a few times, because atheists will pay to put dirt down on you. But in reality, if you look at these pages, they're very well referenced. And the truth of the matter is that atheism is associated with a ton of mental disorders, directly associated with it. And by the way, don't try worming out again. I say it all the time, but I will not stop saying it. These studies don't say you have to be a Christian. They're talking about atheism and self-identified atheists. So whether you are You know, and many of these studies apply regardless of your religion. What other religion? Denying all things spiritual, all things supernatural, even though it's rational to believe in the supernatural, and by the way, it is rational to believe in the supernatural, appears to make you crazy. Okay, atheism is strongly associated with suicide. In fact, I've noticed men's rights activists talk about the skyrocketing male suicide rate. But in fact, the suicide rate among atheists tracks nearly 1-to-1 with the male suicide rate. Males are overwhelmingly more likely to be atheist, and when they go atheist, they're much more likely to kill themselves. They're more likely to be depressed. They're more likely to feel hopeless, pessimistic about life. They are more likely to go to prison, despite the stuff that you might have heard in the atheist propaganda. No, actually, atheists are more likely to go to jail, not less. You do see conversions while they're in jail. That's not too uncommon. In fact, it's very common. No, they're more likely to go to jail. They're more likely to be alcoholics. They're more likely to be drug addicts. They're more likely to be sex addicts. They're more likely to be single mothers. They're more likely to get divorced. They tend to have more unstable careers. Another book you can look at on that would be The Irrational Atheist by Vox Day. From my perspective, I think from the perspective of all of us as a Christian, we would probably actually say Vox Day is pretty darn close to a heretic, given that he's an anti-Trinitarian evangelical. But this is still a great book, The Irrational Atheist, which again makes no real effort to convince you of anything, just to point out all the propaganda that was in books like God is Not Great and Letter to a Christian Nation and The God Delusion. Is just an answer to the fake statements in those books, and those books are full of fake statements. Similar fake statements are to be found in atheist forums all over the place, which, just like feminism and certain other political ideologies, they have their own fake science, they have their own fake history, they have their own grievance narratives. And I'm telling you honestly, if you're a young person, especially a young man, thinking about going into those atheist forums, forget it, man. There's much more interesting philosophies of life than that. But in more to the point, and either of you guys add anything to add, feel free. The truth of the matter is that you were lied to. Atheism doesn't make you smarter. In fact, it's a myth that atheists really have IQs, and becoming atheist won't make you smarter. It won't make you more scientific. It won't make you nicer. In fact, if you act like the average atheist today, it'll probably, make you more socially isolated, because they teach you to be nasty to people. Who else has something to say?
Yeah, atheism is unnatural. To put it bluntly, it's against how humans are designed to interact, and it's against how we understand the universe and truth as we know it. And when you do something that is against your nature in that way, against the nature of how we should be, that there are harmful consequences, just like there would be harmful consequences of painting yourself with lead paint.
I'll tell you, since you mentioned that. Oh, go ahead, John Baptiste.
Well, for one thing, atheism should be a synonym to nihilism, because they're the same thing. Nothing matters because nothing exists, or something like that. It can vary, but the basic context is because I don't believe God exists, then nothing really matters, because there's no greater good that I can aspire to, really. That's how I've been seeing the actions of a lot of the big atheists. It's just like they're unable to really grasp certain concepts about religion and about atheism, about history. It's part of the mindset.
There's the thing. There's the thing. I mean, you've always got to distinguish somewhat, I guess, between the confused atheist and one who's part of the movement. But at this point, the atheist movement has shoved so much propaganda out there then even unwitting religious people sometimes believe the crap they say, like though atheists have higher IQs. No, sorry, not really. Not when you normalize out and factor out stuff that would blow the curve, like the number of autistics or the frequent indoctrination you see in universities today. Here's a book we've mentioned many times, but it's worth mentioning again. The scientist, a real scientist named Justin L. Barrett, Born Believers, The Science of Children's Belief, looking at it globally, not just here. It is simply true that religious observance, regardless of the religion in many cases, at least if it's not a crazy cult, and yes, there is a difference, they live longer, they're less likely to go to jail, they have better marriages, they're actually physically healthier in many cases. And I mean, obviously, we're all Christians and we're going to think Christianity is your best choice, and it is, but literally, we're just talking from a totally secular perspective here. It's not natural to disbelieve in the spiritual and the supernatural. It's not natural to ignore it. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, basically, even being like a follower of Epicurus would be better than modern atheism. And Epicurus thought the height of life was living in a garden and having maybe a cup of wine, discussing philosophy with your best friends, and listening to music played by people. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things that are a better way to have a good life than this cultish atheism. Hell, just becoming a Stoic, even if you don't buy into Christianity, being a Stoic or a Epicurean would be better for you and society than being a movement atheist.
Yeah, because they're not freeing your mind from anything, guys. Sorry. I'll give you another observation, and this is very simple. There are 4 forces of physics, right? Gravity, the weak, the strong, the chemical,
Electromagnetic.
Thank you. I don't know why I can't remember electromagnetic. That's what all of physics is based on, for the most part. And a lot of engineers and Spurgish nerd types go, yeah, then that's all there is in the universe. No. What makes you think there's nothing outside those 4 forces? In fact, it's rather absurd to think there's nothing outside beyond those forces. It's really absurd. What, just because we haven't found them yet? And we actually have evidence of the supernatural of supernatural things outside those forces. We've had that all along.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
And part of it is certain parts of our culture, like test taking, or even being an engineer, in some sense rewards that reductionist thinking. So that if you think that way, and you'll do well on all of your tests in engineering and math, and you'll do really well at Google or Digital Equipment Corporation. But the issue is that type of reductionism only shows the truth of a very small slice of what reality is. And if you try to apply that reductionism to, say, having a good relationship with people you work with, or people in your community, or finding a spouse, that reductionism will not work at all.
No, and in fact, you even start seeing every relation you have with people, whether it's your wife, your kids, your parents, your friends, everything becomes a quid pro quo, and who was better than who, and who was better to who, or who owes me what. That's actually where that reductionist mindset goes, especially because, well, there's nothing beyond this life. Ultimately, you need some happiness, don't you? And and then that becomes the rationalization for everything.
Yeah, and push it hard enough, and it will invert, and it'll be basically, well, my life sucks, so I'm just going to make everyone else's life suck more, and I don't really care if I die. I'm going to die anyways, and I'm going to take you bastards with me.
Well, yeah, and then they start the scapegoating, and it's the God people's fault. It's the God people and their stupid delusions that are the fault. And if we just get rid of God people, we'll have a much better world, and all my problems will be gone. They actually teach you that when you fucking get into some of these crazy atheist cults, and they're big, and they're all over the internet. And I mean, really, I don't. There's nothing I can do about the fact that I'm Christian, because I genuinely believe what I believe. But I swear to anybody who's listening, if it were 10 years ago and I was still an atheist, well, it would have been more like, okay, call it 15 years ago. If for 15 years ago, I'd be saying most of the same shit. Because when I was an atheist, I was embarrassed when I saw bad atheist behavior. I know one of our volunteers, Matt, is our volunteer Matt. He's not here tonight, but he's been on a few streams with us. He's one of our non-believer friends. He is an atheist. We have more than one of those, actually, because they see the same thing I do. He was crushed today. I don't know if you guys saw his message. He's an atheist, and he's a good guy. And he was crushed because he's an atheist, and he's watching how all his fellow atheists are responding to this shooting on social media. And he's just aghast and saying, I have no more hope. I don't know what can I say? This is awful. Because he's seeing the horrible way atheists behave. I have to wonder if he'll be atheist much longer, because really, this kind of behavior is what made me start thinking, you know what? There's something wrong with atheists. And if there's something wrong with atheists, there may be something wrong with the atheism. I mean, because it's so associated with dysfunctional behavior. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, and it's hilarious when they say that it's an answer to a single proposition that has no other consequences, because it's such a fundamental a part of how we look at the world and life, right? Because if God exists, then there can be order in the universe and meaning and all these other things, and we can sort of actually have a meaningful life. And if God doesn't exist, any meaning we assign is arbitrary. And so if I decide that the meaning of life is to destroy all life, there's no reason for me not to pursue that as aggressively as, say, Mother Teresa pursued charity, and that there's that disconnect of how do you live your life if God exists or doesn't exist.
Yeah, and to get it back down for people who just don't get it, surely we want you to join our religion. Of course we do. But it's 6 of one and a half to dozen of the others, because you have to be able to get along in a world with people who don't agree with you. This is why I somehow managed to maintain friends with Jews, Hindus, Muslims, Mormons, and a bunch of other people, because you do have to accept other people as they are. I think it's the radical non-acceptance of a different worldview among young atheists that truly terrifies me. They just feel entitled to tell the rest of us that they're the rational ones and no one else is, and they'll determine for themselves, based on their own personal empathy and their own common sense, what's right and wrong in every situation. And it just seems never to occur to them that if everybody does that, you have no moral or ethical society, because everybody's deciding on their own, which sounds liberating until you have to deal with somebody else who's liberated, who doesn't see things your way and thinks that he's right to treat you like garbage or take from you or vandalize you or whatever else, because there's no ultimate standards anywhere in atheism.
Well, this is true. There is no real standards to atheism. The last atheist that truly tried to create a set of standards was Nietzsche. Yeah, Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, I think they usually say.
Yeah,
doesn't do anything very well. Yeah.
He went crazy. He went crazy while writing the Superman, which was trying to figure out a morality without God. And the whole Death of God book was more of a cautionary tale, I think, of, let's not continue down this path that we're going, because it's not going to end well. That's essentially what that whole book was about. It wasn't about, the actual death of God or how atheism won. It's like, the path that we're going on, it doesn't seem like it's a good path. Doesn't seem like it's going to do anything. Because it's like, it makes the movement and philosophy beyond more than just tolerate us. It's making it to be the moral arbitrators, the arbitrators of what is moral and what is not, and that's what New Atheism tries to do, in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, and I apologize for harping on this, but the sort of shocking and disgusting part of this isn't so much the shooting itself, which is a tragedy and horrible, and my prayers are with the victims and everyone else affected, but the fact that at least some of the popular atheists in the media or on Twitter or whatever are basically using it as an excuse to spit on people who pray. And it's not as though they're like, oh, this is a horrible thing. It's more they're doing exactly what you said, John Baptiste. They're claiming that they're the moral arbitrators, and basically kind of blaming Christians for bringing it onto themselves because we pray or something like that. I'm not really sure I understand it completely yet, but it's. Go ahead.
I've seen it. Literally, they had it coming. I've seen it. And I never thought I would see it in the United States. But I mean, I've actually even I was in a stream once with V. Monroe, and I said, look, I'm not giving up my faith for you. And I don't know if it was him or one of his readers, but the instant response was, why not? And I'm like, that just ran a chill down my spine. Really? You think you can just demand that I give up something I believe to make you happy?
Well, it seems like that they go on the proposition that just because we're engaging them in this debate, that we're actually debating with them and not trying to have a conversation, and that we're trying to convince them to believe in God. That is their before any atheist on the internet actually leaves a bait comment or tries to actually quote unquote have a conversation with a theist or with a Christian. They go on to the presupposition that the whole purpose is to get one party to change their mind, and that's not how it works. It's not how it should work.
No, the premise that you don't believe, that's fine, but your presupposition that anybody else has to prove anything to you, or that something is not true until it's proved to your personal satisfaction, needs to go. And actually, really, if you even go through that attitude with life, nothing's true unless I say it's true. Watch how fast your life falls apart when you try that crap. Not to mention how many people don't want to hang around you or associate with you anymore.
Yeah, life is really, really hard, and it's taken us literally thousands of years to basically figure out how to do it in any way that like we get a chance to survive. And if you basically clear the plate or erase anything and say, okay, we have to start from scratch and you have to prove everything to me, you're going to have a real hard time, because you'll be trying to catch up with basically 10,000 years of very, very difficult thought and things that wise people have figured out and taught their descendants and so on and so forth. Go ahead.
Finish your thought, and then we got to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is it's not about belief in God. I mean, it is, but the thing that it affects is you're throwing away literally thousands of years of knowledge of your civilization when you say, I'm not going to believe in God and I'm not going to listen to religion.
It's more because, especially, and this is what it's gotten to, I will not listen to religious men. I'm flashing a screen here on a film I've been trying to support for some time called Martyred in the USR. And it is about how militant atheists targeted, tortured, raped, murdered, mutilated countless religious people, Christians and Jews. More Christians, although, in sheer numbers, but I think that's because there were just more Christians there. The Orthodox believing Jews also got it. The secular atheistic Jews didn't have trouble, but Orthodox Jews and serious Christians were murdered. This is a picture of a man who had his tongue cut out for praying, all under the militant atheist regime of the USSR. And by the way, I'm getting sick of hearing atheists say, well, you don't know the difference between atheism and communism. Shut up, because it's not just communist atheist regimes that have done this. And in any case, it was the atheism that motivated it. Undeniably, irrefutably so. Based on the declaration that religion is irrational superstition and dangerous to society and getting in the way of science and progress. Certain people, by the way, calling themselves men's rights activists or men's human rights activists really need to search their consciences and start looking at stuff like this, because when you scapegoat the religious and make them your designated whipping boy for everything wrong in the universe, eventually things like this happen. And so I'm going to say it again. Everybody out there, even if you're not religious, start taking notice of bad atheist action, bad atheist behavior, and yes, atheist-motivated crime. And get skeptical when they say there's no such thing, because there is. All right, thank you, John Baptiste. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to ask everybody again, please give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Please give us your financial and spiritual support. Please tell your friends and enemies. And remember, it is okay to get skeptical of atheists and their bullshit. God bless everybody, and Ave Maria.